fall apart. So that has fortunately been held off, and then the party continues. So Montreal is mostly known for its fine cuisine and its street dancing and festivals and things like that, and enough politics to get in the way of that. So the bridges that cross the St. Lawrence, of which there are 28, sort of have made separation impossible, because the commerce of Canada together and then with their neighboring states in the United States mean this whole area is unified economically, culturally, and it has common values. So it's unimaginable that it would sort of fall apart into disarray, which is sort of the Balkan problem, let's say. Anybody know what that ship is? I found this picture. It's not the one we're on, I know that. But anyway, upriver from Montreal begin the Great Rapids, which are one called La Chine, which is the one right outside the center of Montreal, which was called in French the China, as if they said if you keep going up the river far enough, you'll get to China, which was sort of the fool's paradise for adventurers in the North America. But these rapids are full of terrible rocks and were impassable. The natives would portage their canoes over them, and at certain points they're completely impassable. Just in La Chine and the Long Sault, which is just above there, they drop about 2 meters in 2 miles, which makes them about Class 5 rapids. Well, nonetheless, some people tried to run them in the bad old days with log rafts, and many people died trying to get through them. So in 1825, there was a canal built outside from Montreal up past La Chine Rapids, and that allowed commerce further up. But in the last century, there were steamboats would run it for fun, which of course some of them didn't make it. And here they are today. They're still rough. The shipping channel is around them. But now you can get a ride on one of these if you want the thrill of getting all wet and cold and excited. And then if you go too far, you'll fall over this. So it's a tricky country. And the St. Lawrence, they say it's stepways to the sea. And this is the one, of course, of Niagara, which is the outlet of Lake Ontario. And it is divided by Goat Island. So one side's Canadian, one side's the U.S. But it's all one big waterfall of about 60 meters, of 210 feet about. And if you've ever been there, ever got married there, I don't know. I missed that one. But I always remember this scene where it's just so loud and you're so wet. And I remember that the great conductor Toscanini stood there and he said, fortissimo at last. Well, the history goes on, and it gets so peaceful that we now cooperate so much that we don't even think that all these troubles ever happened. So this is the signing of the treaty to build the St. Lawrence Seaway with President Eisenhower, and one of his greater achievements of his era, and then the Canadian Prime Minister, I don't know his name, but they signed the agreement to build the locks and to share the transit and to manage the way in for large shipping to get all the way up into the Great Lakes. Previously, it was so constricted that industry up on the Great Lakes was all going by canal and by rail. But when the Seaway was built and opened in 1959, it was a major economic impact, especially for Canada, because that meant they didn't have to ship goods out so far by rail, and they could take ocean-going ships all the way up. And so this is just the sketch map of it: Lake Erie, Niagara, around to Toronto, and the Welland Canal goes into Lake Erie, then Lake Ontario, and then Eisenhower Lock, and then down to what they call Lake St. Francis, into the lower river, and then you come all the way out into Quebec. So the ships are going around all these old rapids, and this is particularly like the symbol of the Canadian and U.S. combined to manage this great seaway, which still to this day is very busy. Now here's the Queen here with President Eisenhower at the opening. So this was big news in 1959 for the whole North American economy. And here's Mamie and Eisenhower being greeted on the Navy ship. But what this did is it provided secure transit all the way from Lake Superior out to sea and back. And again, there are two sections. The international section is the one shared with the U.S. border, and then the Canadian section is just within Quebec. And it is still busy because of all of the cities and activity of the Great Lake region. And here's the trivia for the day. What major American city is north of Canada? Detroit. But So you can see a lot of ships coming out through this whole area. Just today there were a couple out here. Mostly ore carriers, lumber carriers, grain carriers, different things. There's no passenger line service up here. An occasional small cruise ship will come up through the Great Lakes, but it's so vast that it's sort of out of reach. And of course, it's seasonal. It gets very cold. So up these different locks, they come down from Lake Ontario, Erie, then come down to the sea level finally just at Montreal. But it is the great extension of the historical access into North America. You don't have to take a canoe anymore. You can take a ride on one of these. Of course, some of them have been kicked up quite a bit by the winter, and they used to have a particular ship called a whaleback so that the deck would be cambered and all water would just roll off of it, and they look like a giant floating sausage. But in the winter, they sometimes have to close it down because in the severe winter, the ice builds up so bad that even the icebreakers can't get through. There's also sediment, so they have to dredge it. So this is what the management of the seaway is all about. It's just continuing to dig down deeper canals so bigger ships can get up and keep the lifeline open for the center of the continent. There's also a great deal of hydroelectric development in Canada. This is one of the Daniel Johnson's dam further up in Quebec, and this has been a controversy because there's so many upland parts of particularly Quebec that have been flooded, and the native nations have complained about it. They lose land. There's a big controversy over the St. James Bay, which is up by Hudson Bay, very far north. But this provides not just enough electricity for the industry of Quebec and much of eastern Canada, it also provides a lot for New England and New York State. And as another historical rumor that I remember, when there was a debate about the independence of Quebec, there was a meeting of financiers and power officials in New York and New England who then sat down with their Hydro-Quebec colleagues and said, if Quebec becomes independent, we'll have to renegotiate all of our long-term agreements, and it probably won't be such a good deal for you. So they advised, why don't you just keep the Union of Canada together and we'll continue to do business because everything will get disrupted otherwise. And so that was one of those economic decisions that kind of tamped down the nationalism that the Quebecois are famous for. Well, anyway, as you go further up the river, you get into the Thousand Islands area. I don't know if any of you have been up there. That's on the Ontario-New York border. And this is a particularly beautiful part of the river because there literally are 1,000 islands and little specks of housing on a lot of them, and it's quite beautiful area because you come from this vast bay into the narrow river, then it opens up into this area before it opens up into the Great Lake. And overlooking that area, here's one of the Quebec abbey, a monastery called Saint-Bennet-du-Lac, which was built in the 1920s. And then you have private homes on many of these islands, especially from the American side. And so here's one called Bolt Castle, which was built in about 1910. It was finally finished, and it was built by the owner of the Waldorf Astoria, as if he didn't have enough rooms to stay in. And this is now become, it went into decline, and then it was picked up as a park, and now it's a restoration project. And you can take a little boat out there and see its various semi-medieval constructions. But there are a lot of mansions on these little islands in a very wonderful place in the summertime. This is a little boathouse, but that's ersatz history and construction. But of course, the greater attraction is just the land and the water. So this is the Malbaie River, which is on the north side of the river, east of Quebec, and it has a bay opening, but Samuel de Champlain ran aground in there trying to go up the river, so he called it Malbaie, or the Bad Bay. Now it has a gorge that goes up and is a very scenic area. The other one, which we were passing by, did not get to go up, is the Saguenay Fjord, which is a true fjord flooded up. It doesn't have a river except at the very height, but you can go up about 100 kilometers up in the fjord land, and boats and excursions go up there. And here's the Cap Trinité, and then up high on there, there's a statue of the Virgin Mary. So you can go see this fjord land on another cruise. On this ship, again, can't quite turn around. Well, it probably can go up, but it can't turn around and get back. But we don't want to press our luck. And it's a great hiking land. Now, a lot of this becomes pretty rough scrub conifer forests that are vast, and above the riverbanks, you have a boreal forest. There are even seals up in the Saguenay itself, so that's salt water right there. But above that, it becomes great tumbling fresh water out of the Laurentians and the different lakes that are in northern Quebec. We will go see this if you're on that excursion at Montmorency Falls. And in the winter, that's actually higher than Niagara. It gets all iced over, and again, everybody goes out to have fun and skiing and hiking. For some reason, the Canadians are not allergic to the cold. I don't know how they got that way, but so it's a winter wonderland. I've been up there skiing. It's really quite wonderful and not crowded, unlike some places. So this is the joy of Canada on a different season. Notice that there's no color to those leaves. So that you go up there and you find little villages up in the far back in Quebec, and you see, so these are really tough people who eked a living out so far away. And they often were seasonal farmers, hunters, traders, and then this is the famous product of the maple syrup. They tap the trees, and this is common all down into New England and such. And of course, that was back when sugar was so valuable that to tap and boil up maple syrup, that was a prized staple. It wasn't just a little condiment for your pancakes. Then if you go even farther north in Quebec, you get this fantastic tundra beyond the forest that is pockmarked with meteor strikes like this lake, and there's some tremendous large ones up there that are remnant of another era, because the shield is actually very ancient stonework that covers vast area, and you can see the geological history of the Earth up there. Whoop, that's the geological history of the Earth in one quick view. So I'm going to continue to actually take you back down the river and just show you. This is the Gaspé, which is a mountainous region. The better farmlands to the west, and Gaspé right there on the end is on very dramatic cliffs. And this was noted by navigators when they came up the bay. Coming into the river, there was this roche percée, they call it in French, which had these caves that had been beaten through the rock by millennia of erosion. And so that was a marker. You're finally getting up toward Quebec. Now, we passed it earlier today, and unfortunately, the rocks have all fallen down. Somebody really should rebuild these things. But that's a site in Gaspé, which is a very rugged place and beautiful overlooks to the St. Lawrence. And so we come from the larger ocean into the bay and then up the river, and so I hope you can appreciate some of the scenery here, but you'll also note that it's very developed as we get up into the Central Valley of Quebec to Montreal. So all of the automobile and industry and all that, what it's done to the river is unfortunately pollute a lot of it very severely up to the 1960s, and so then a scheme was made to try to clean up the sources of pollution, preserve the fish stocks, and restore this environment. So that has been fairly successful. The one thing that hasn't come back are the whales very much. This is a salmon farm because they had fished out all of the wild salmon, or they were too polluted for them to get up past dams and things. And so this is a salmon farm in Quebec. But the species are still there. They may restore themselves over time if they're protected enough. But you notice you don't see many fishing vessels out here at all because it's just been depleted. But the basic life forms are still there, the planktons, the crustaceans, the various flounders and fish that are there on the bottom, the cod. This is the famous lamprey eel, which is a gift to the world from upper St. Lawrence and the Great Lakes that came down through the river and then as a voracious feeder on other fish and a sort of a terror of the deep. Here's some of the beluga whales, which there's still a remnant population of them. The great white whale, I talked about this the other day. The canary, because it sings and you can hear it on the surface. And they've had to stop the capture of these for marine aquariums, though, now that's illegal. But before fishermen would try to catch one, they could sell it for up to $100,000. So they were being depleted just for display for a while. But now they're protected. And there are other whales that come in. So depending on the migratory season of the whale, you can go right out, not from Quebec, but down in the area where we just passed Gaspé and see some of the whales. And then occasionally a sailor with ice in their blood can come up here and sail around. Of course, in the summer it's very nice. In the winter it gets very cold, and then everybody puts their boat away. But you can see the plankton blooms in the water here in the bay. That's Anacostia Island there, and that's Prince Edward Island, Magdalena Island. This has, again, farmland, but it has also in the center of it a remnant forest, which is now a preserve. And then you have these odd, what they call the mushroom rocks off of the Anacostia Island. And so there's, geographic curiosities around. We didn't get to stop at Prince Edward Islands, but this is a very calm seas around there on the west side of Nova Scotia. And then it also has broad beaches. So if you're there in July and August, you can almost think you're on a Caribbean vacation until October. But there are a lot of places if you get around all of the shores of the bays, particularly on the south side. There are all these cliff overlooks to St. Lawrence. And things to do if you are energetic enough. Again, erosion is the common story of these cliffs. And I'm going to last take you to the outside of the bay, which is Newfoundland and Labrador, which have combined as a single province now for Canada. And they are the outer Maritimes, of course. Well, this is probably the most dramatic part of all of the St. Lawrence, is the deep fjords of Newfoundland. And there are also some up in Labrador, but this island has over 6,000 miles of coast, which is very indented and has these, again, fjord-like constructions made by the sea from the ice age that scoured the tops and dug deep valleys. And so there are many little corners to Newfoundland. And in the center, there's a large tundra. And you see that little lake there. That, again, is a meteor strike with the other island in it, which is the debris from the strike millions of years ago. So these are some of the things you just won't get to see on a bus, but I'm just showing it to you anyway. The sort of tundra-like Arctic conditions in Newfoundland are spectacular in the summer, but you wouldn't want to be there in the winter. It's usually clouded over, especially because of, again, the sea conditions nearby. And but in the summer, if you're a hiker, it's a downright Norwegian experience. And if you get lost, somebody will help you. This is the Newfie dog, which is famously will run into the water to help fishermen pull nets out, but it'll also pull you out of the water if you fall in. There are communities in Newfoundland, of course, for now almost 500 years, living off the fishing. But now that the fishing has stopped, amazingly, they are now exporting people. A lot of these villages are now abandoned. And so Newfoundland, which is the last province of Canada to join the Federation, it was a British Crown colony till 1949, and the Newfoundlanders were more related to their trading partners and friends on the other side of the pond, and they are still sort of considered a little bit outside of the rest of Canada, but they live in such difficult conditions there. It's so cold and icy and foggy that they supposedly have over 5,000 words for weather, which are more grunts than anything, I believe, but the fishing goes on a little bit, but now it's become a yachting center. People sail up and around it. It's rough water, so it's for the, let's say, those who have a little ice in their blood. But these quaint little villages are sort of left in time. And then some still go out there to fish on a small scale for other, not large quantity, but local fishing is permitted. And so here's a couple of the fishing fleet going out. And you can see you're not far from the Arctic when you have an iceberg in the way. And so if you want to go on another cruise, I recommend Newfoundland Cruises. They give you the full impact of the sea. I know you're getting bored by the calm, warm weather we're having, so if you want to go on a real real ride, you can get on one of these. And this is, let's say, quite away from the cafes of Quebec, but I just show you this because it's so nice to see cold, really cold conditions, because we somehow missed it on this trip. So it's a big danger, but some guys are tough, you know. They just they don't know. So I'm gonna leave you with a couple of writings here of where did my papers go? Oh, here's one that is by Nicole Levent, who is a Quebec writer. Pardon my pronunciation, but it says, "J'ai la nostalgie d'une mer jolie, d'un vent qui rit, d'un passage mamie, qui met son prix," which is, I have nostalgia for a lovely sea, of a wind that laughs, of a countryside, my friend. This to me is priceless. And, you know, as we go up the St. Lawrence, this is just this morning out there, if you saw that lovely mist. And this is up near Quebec City coming in, as you see the farmlands going up the hill. And so I'll give another Canadian poem by Kenzie McNeil, who said, "We are an island, a rock in the stream. We are a people as proud as there has ever been. In a soft summer breeze or in a wild winter wind, the home of our hearts, Canada. And I wish you a great visit here and see you ashore. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.